Hi everyone, welcome to your first video lesson. So we're starting a new topic on fractions today. So this will probably be our topic for the next few lessons. So some of this you may have seen before, in which case great, should be good at it. Some of it may be new. So we'll get started with the first thing. So with fractions, we see them written like how it's written down here. So it's one number, a line, and then another number. So there's two numbers here. There's this number at the top, and what we call that the numerator. So the number on the top we call the numerator. So I'm just going to underline that as a keyword. And what this tells us, that tells us how many of the fractions of the whole there are. So I'll come back to that in a second. The second number in a fraction, this one down here, this one we call the denominator. So these are two words you'll need to know with fractions. And the bottom number of the fraction, that tells us how many pieces the whole thing has been broken up into. So I've got this little diagram down here in this corner. The circle split into four parts. So I've got a fraction 3/4. And this tells us that the whole thing, so this whole circle, has been split into four, because the denominator is 4. And the 3 at the top, that tells us that 3 of those parts, so there's this one, and this one. So 3/4 of a circle would look like this, because we've got quarters, and we've got 3 of them. So 3/4. So this is the first skill we need to do today. This is identifying the numerator and the denominator. So we're going to go through an example. So this is example 1. So we're identifying the numerator. So thinking back to what we did before, is that the top or the bottom of the fraction? The numerator is the top of the fraction. So I'll write that in. So for this one, fairly straightforward. When we know what we're looking for, it's the top number. So with this first one, the numerator would be 6. Second one, numerator is still at the top, it's just going to be this 1. Third one, numerator is the top of the fraction, so it's just 2. And last one, the numerator of the fraction, the top, so it would be 5. So when you know what you're looking for with the numerator, really quite straightforward, you're just identifying which one it is. So that's example 1. Example 2, we're looking for, this should say denominator, sorry. To change that, denominator. So the denominator of this one, we've got 9, because that is the bottom of the fraction. And because it's the denominator for all of these questions, we're always looking for the bottom, so we can see that for all of these, the bottom of the fraction is 9. So numerator is always the top of the fraction, denominator is always the bottom of the fraction. So the key thing to remember is numerator is top, denominator is the bottom of the fraction. So those are our first skills for the lesson. So what I'd like you to do now is pause this, and I'd like you to have a go at the questions 1 and 2 on the worksheet. So they should be very similar to what we've just done. So identifying the numerator, identifying the denominator of the fraction. So go away, have a go at those, pause the video, and then when you've done questions 1 and 2, I will go on to the next bit, and I'll put the answers up at the end. So pause the video now and go have a go at questions 1 and 2 from the worksheet. Okay, assuming you've done questions 1 and 2 now, we're going to carry on now. We're going to go on to the next example of what we're doing today. So now we're looking at ordering unit fractions. So I'm just going to underline unit fractions. So what it means by unit fractions is a unit, that just means 1 or ones of something. So what a unit fraction is, that is when you've got ones on the top of the fraction. So these are all, so that's 1/3, that's 1/2, that is 1/4. And what the question is asking is put them in order of size. So with this one, you don't always need to draw a diagram, but I am going to for this first question. So what this will do, this will help us to understand what we're doing. So if we've got 1/3, we've said that the denominator of the fraction, that tells us how many pieces we're splitting the whole into. So if we've got this one here, this is the whole, this rectangle. So if we're doing thirds, that's 3 on the denominator. We're going to split that into 3 parts. So don't worry, my lines aren't very equal, but on yours, you could use a ruler, so it would be. So this one, each of these is a third. And we've got one of them. So we're going to shade in one of these thirds. So that is 1/3 of the whole. So next one up is 1/2. So denominator is 2. So how many are we going to split the shape into? We're going to split it into 2. So we split this shape into 2 equal-ish parts. So not equal in my one because I've not done it with a ruler, but they should be equal. And then we're going to shade in, because it's 1/2, we're going to shade in one of them, because our numerator, how many there are, is 1. So here we've got 1/2. So I'll just write on this, so that's 1/3. That is 1/2. So we can see just by looking, 1/2 is bigger than 1/3. So we've already sorted them. So we know our list is going to go, a third is smaller than a half. We just need to work out where a quarter is going to go in this. So again, we've got one, so we'll worry about that after. We'll do the denominator first. So denominator tells us how many we're splitting it into. So we're going to split this into 4. So what I'm going to do, actually, I'm going to split it into 2 and then split them into 2 to get 4 overall. So I've got split it into 2. Split that into 2. Oh, not very neat. Split that into 2 as well. So we can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We split it into 2. So we split it into 4, and we've got one of them. So we're just going to shade in one of these. So you can see that's quite a bit smaller than a third or a half. So we're going smallest to biggest. So our order would be a quarter. Oh. So 1/4 is the smallest. 1/3 is the next smallest. And 1/2 is the biggest out of them. So look at the denominators of these. What do you notice? So what we see, the biggest number denominator 4, that goes here. Then we've got 3, then we've got 2. So we see that the smaller the number here, if it's the same number on top, so if it's 1 on all of them, the smaller the number at the bottom, that's the less bits we're splitting it into. So we're going to end up with bigger parts. So 1/2 is bigger than 1/3, which is bigger than 1/4 or a quarter. So if we had a fifth, or 1/5, that would be splitting into 5, and then it would just be one of them, so that would be even smaller. A tenth would be even smaller, because you're splitting it into more parts. So the rule for this is if it's 1 for the top all of it, 1 for the top of all of them, so we've got 1/3, 1/2, 1/4, what that means is we look for the smallest number. So smaller denominator, bigger fraction. Oh, smaller denominator. Oh. Smaller denominator, bigger fraction. And I just want to make a note at this point. Oh. Trying to make a note at this point. Smaller denominator if the numerator is the same. So if it's 1 for all of them, then it would be the smaller denominator is a bigger fraction. Okay, so now I'd like to pause this and have a go at question 3 on the sheet. So have a go at question 3. Should be able to do it. If you're struggling a bit, come back, watch this section of the video again, and that should help. So we're going over, you don't need to draw the diagram each time. You can use the rule if it's got the same numerator, so if it's got 1, then the smaller the denominator, the bigger the fraction. So this one we could tell a half was biggest because that was the smallest number on the denominator. Okay, so have a go and have a go at question 3. Okay, and last skill of the lesson, we're going to go on to example 4. This is simplifying fractions. So I'm going to do a diagram for this first one, but we're not going to do diagrams for all of them. When we've done the first one, I'm going to show you the rule that means you can do it a lot quicker without drawing a diagram. So here we can see we're no longer doing unit fractions because we've got a numerator of 2. So we're going to draw this as a diagram though. So we're going to draw a rectangle again. And we're going to split it into 6. So to do that, I'm going to split it into 3. Not very equal. 1, 2, 3. And then, because we're doing a 6, we're going to halve all of them. So they should be the same size, but with mine, I haven't used a ruler, so they're not exact. But you can see it's split into 6, what should be equal sizes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we've got split into 6, so we've done that. And we've got 2 as our numerator, so we've got 2 of these parts. So we've got 1, and we've got 2. So those are our 2 parts. And when we were splitting it up, I split it into 3 and then into 2 because that makes 6 parts altogether. Let's do that above. So when we're simplifying it, what we're doing is we're trying to find a fraction that equals the same thing, but that is written differently. So basically one where the top and the bottom, we can't write any simpler. So I'm going to draw another one above. So we split it into 3 parts. So 1, 2, 3. And then we split it in half again when we're splitting into 6. But we can see now, if we don't split it in half again, these 2 here, these 2 parts, they make up the same as one of these. So these 2/6, they make up the same as 1/3. So this one's split into 3, so these are all thirds. So we've got that 2/6 equals 1/3. And we can see how we get there without using a diagram. We can see it using the diagram, we can see that they're equal to each other. But the way we do it without a diagram, and this is the way we'll be doing it because it's much quicker than drawing diagrams. So if we've got 2/6, what we need to do is look for a number that we can divide the top and the bottom by. So if we've got 2/6, what number can we divide 2 by and we can divide 6 by? So 2, we can divide that by 2, so we'll do that because we can also divide 6 by 2. So if we do 2, we can divide that by 2. So that just gives us 1. And then, because we've got a fraction, if we want to keep these fractions the same, we have to do the same thing to the top and the bottom. So we also have to divide this by 2, otherwise it'll be a different fraction. So if we divide that by 2, we get a third, 1/3. And that's what we could see over here. 1/3 is equal to 2/6, because you've got double as many, but they're half as big. So that is equal to 1/3. So we divide the top by 2, and we divide the bottom by 2. And with these, it's all the same idea. As long as you divide or times the top and the bottom by the same thing, it'll stay the same. And this is called equivalent fractions. So I'm going to write a note of this as well, equivalent fractions. So equivalent just means the same as. So equivalent fractions. So this is really useful because we can come up with simpler fractions. So 3 and 12. Using the same idea as what we did here, we're looking for a number that we can divide by 3. Sorry, that we can divide 3 by, and that we can divide 12 by. So if you're not sure, you can write the factors out, that might help you. So 3, what can we divide 3 by? So we could divide it by 1, or we could divide it by 3. So we can divide 12 by them as well. So what we'll do, we'll divide it by 3. So if we divide 3 by 3, we get 1. If we divide 12 by 3, we get 4. So 3/12 equals 1/4. So if you imagine cutting something into 12 pieces, if you had 3 of them, you would have the same as if you had 1/4 of it. So imagine you cut a cake into 12. If you had 3 slices, you would have had the same as 1/4 of the cake. Okay, very last example and then the last bit of practice. So we've got 2/16 now. What we're going to try and do is we're going to try and simplify this. So again, we need to think of a number that we can divide 2 by and that we can divide 16 by. So the only numbers we can divide 2 by is 1 and 2. So we're going to pick 2 because if you divide it by 1, it'll just stay the same, we'll end up with the same fraction. So let's divide this by 2. So if we divide it by 2, we just end up with 1. If we divide 16 by 2, we end up with 8. So 2/16 is equal to 1/8. So if you cut something into 16 pieces and then you took 2 of them, it would be the same as if you'd cut it into 8 and just taken 1 piece. So equivalent fraction is really useful. We are going to be spending more time on this next lesson as well. But really good. So have a go now at example 4, and this is the key thing for this lesson. I want everyone to get really good at this. So key learning objective. This is. So I want everyone to be able to simplify fractions. We will be doing more practice on it next lesson, but next lesson we're also going to do harder ones. So this is the key skill to learn for this lesson, simplifying fractions.